at that time nobody had cars because they didn't make any cars during the war. And it was about 3 years after the war before anybody got them. And that's what Tiny used to do with our girls. As soon as one of them started school, the next one got to go with him feeding. And he always laughed. Carol was the one that would stand up to steer. He'd put it in no gear, and she'd stand up to steer, and the dog would put his paws on the dash to make sure she was going in the right place. They used to have the foot races. And I have a picture starting, in front of the school and going east down towards the dump. And that is exactly where I remember running those races. We'd practice for weeks because you could get, I think you could get a nickel if you won a game. And the nickel was an ice cream cone then. At first, the school picnics were close, and I remember going on the south side of the tracks, clear down there, the big Vandalia picnic. You've heard of that?
I haven't, actually.
Okay, it is a Norwegian holiday. I don't know the exact date, but I know one of the pictures I have over on the table. I've just been putting all local history things over there, try to get through them. But it was a big, all community. I mean, Glasgow people, Nashville people, Opine people, and it was in that coulee right up, right under the translator out there. And I can remember going there and doing the same thing we did is on the Forge trains. We would park here, and everybody would have their own lunch in the blanket and sit around on it. But the kids would run from one place to another to meet everybody. In fact, what it reminds me of is a group of lambs.
Oh.
You've seen them
they
just
skip and they kick
and
in and running around.
Yeah, and they gather together. Anyone who isn't in the first time around gets in the second time. But we'd meet everybody that we could remember from last time and not know half of them. But this was, it really was a big thing. And it was called, we always called it the Vandalia picnic. But I also remember going out there, and that would have been after, that had to be after 8th grade because Katie Gosh had her horse, and Johnny Hens had his, and I had mine, and we got to ride our horses out to it. That was the big, I mean, you want elite in class.
Well, I'm sure that was a race the whole way there.
No, not necessarily. It was just sort of in fact, for some reason, that wouldn't have been the same day, but I just found pictures of Johnny on his horse on the old white bridge out here, and Katie on hers, so I must have taken the pictures. But that was one of the school picnics, and the road down there was right south of the tracks.
Okay.
And you could go all the way to Vandalia on it, but I think that they've sort of closed it off since, not wanting that many people that close. And the other place was the hot water wells, and that was all through high school.
Now, where were the hot water wells?
Sleeping Buffalo.
Okay. Now, was it always called the hot water wells? Did the Legion have something to do with that?
After that, the Malta American Legion bought it, and they tried to keep it running for a while.
And it was all just open air back then, wasn't it? There wasn't really any buildings? Okay,
the hot pool was closed. The center one was open, and then the big one was open.
Okay.
And we had, and I don't know why you remember little things. On the 31st of March, on our 8th grade, we had a 8th grade picnic up there. It wasn't the last day of school, it was just celebrating. And it snowed, and I can remember the snow prints going from the big pool, and I don't know why that would have had water in it at that time, but going back and forth from the middle pool to the big pool. And I remember Agnes got pneumonia after it. I mean, she was so sick. And I don't remember it bothering many of the rest of us. But the other thing, and I don't know if it was the same picnic or not, we went up in Hence's school bus, which was a pickup with a wooden house on the back and seats on the outside of it. But I remember riding up there in that. So I'm guessing it just about had to have been the 8th grade, because at that time nobody had cars, because they didn't make any cars during the war. And it was about 3 years after the war before anybody got them. So any car was pretty valuable.
I can imagine.
Yeah, one of the things that I ran into now that I remember was the rationing. And it gave the name of who got 2 tires were allowed by the board. And one thing I remember was that August Hens was awarded 2 tires. He didn't get the tires, this was just the certificate to buy the tires, because he was delivering milk, which was considered a food staple. And 2 other people got tires. And I don't know why I had those I've gone through these old clippings that I kept for one reason or another, and that was one of it. The food, of course, was rationed. And shoes. Oh, shoes were not nice. And when they loosened up with you could buy shoes. You could get a pair of shoes with 2 colors on them, like a light brown and a dark brown, and that beat anything we'd had for a long time.
Yeah, that's something that my generation's never even thought of as rationing. Not only the fact that there wasn't a lot of it, but it was limited in what they would let you buy. You had to have proof that you could buy it to get it.
Well, and one of the problems was everybody had their own ration book for so what. But on the ranches or the farms where you were cooking for a large crew, and sugar was really one of boy, at the Cornwell Ranch, pies were the thing. And you need pies, or you need sugar for pies. And to try to cook for men, I can remember people talking about, and when he came, he only had so many sugar coupons left. But when somebody came to work on a ranch, he had to give his ration books. And it wasn't that there was a shortage of food. They had more meat than most. But that...
Sugar was a high commodity for those guys.
Oh, I know. I remember that was when they invented the sugarless cakes. Mm-hmm. I don't remember them. I'm not sure we ever had that, but that was... If you could use less sugar in a cake, it was a consideration.
Yeah. I remember reading in the history books they talked about victory gardens. Was that a thing, or everyone just already had a garden, so?
No, they added I grew up in town. Anybody out of town had gardens. But they promoted the gardens. See, I finished the 8th grade the year the war was over. So my high school was in this readjustment But we did get food, which helped. Yeah, the one other thing that I do remember about the war was the aluminum drives. And we went from house to house, up and down the streets with our wagons, all well organized. The scouts would have been very involved in that. And some of the things that women gave were very, very pretty to a child. And I can remember one of the women who wouldn't have had anything came out and gave aluminum glasses with a black ring around them. And I thought those were the most beautiful things I had ever seen, and it must have hurt her so much to get that, but it made it important to me. And that book that Lamae mentioned to you last time, the influenza, brought out how much of this was like the aluminum drives and the sugar rationing and the bonds, I think, were valid, but the government wanted to make the people feel that this war was pretty hard to imagine sitting here as a child what actually was going on the Bataan March in the middle of the Pacific. But
Yeah.
when you saw people giving away these beautiful aluminum things to help with the war, or couldn't get sugar for the war, it was an education in itself. What scares you is how fast you could be without anything. Just take electricity away from you and see where. Well, and I can remember Tiny saying too that they had the sheep during the Depression. More so, I think they ate more. Well, they ate sheep during the summer, and they could kill a beef in the winter and eat it up. But by the time they fed a whole crew, they'd gone through a sheep in a couple days, and you could keep it. And that would be one of the problems of the storage on that, keeping anything cool in the summer. But he said that they really never were short of food. The variety wasn't. But one of the things that he remembered was they were basically on a ranch rather than a farm. But at school, a number of the families would come with sandwiches for lunch, but the only thing they had to put on them was lard. And if you're hungry enough, that lard isn't that bad.
Oh, I'm sure, but I don't think lard's one of my favorites.
Well, yeah, it isn't. And I have always said that I really think if you look at the whole history of the world, my generation lived in the best of times.
Yeah.
And maybe it was that we lived in the best of places. Those first years we didn't gain much weight, but we sure had a lot of strength. And
there was a lot of community and family too, which
and there
really
was
means a lot.
never a time when there wasn't food for the family or work to do, and that's a big key.
So we talked a lot about how the war really had an impact on the community. What other events were kind of the big events in Hinsdale that kind of shaped it and people really remember?
Well, there were 2 wars. And the Depression, I think, would be the big one, because you started out with so much hope and saw so much lost. The people like I spent the other night watching that video that Lamae put on, that the day we took Ramona Hunter up. And those people had hope. They had good lives there. Until that drought, and there just was nothing left. You drive up through those places now, but one of the remarks Ramona made was she pointed in one, and there was a big house over there with a pool there, and we always knew there was going to be a big picnic on any holiday there. You didn't have to put a sign up, you just knew you were going there. And she said, we had a good life. And most of her life was spent after her father had died. She had a very dynamic mother, but they moved down to school for the winter. And it's hard to imagine what those families had to live on throughout the whole winter. These families were farming.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have animals. Well, they all had horses too. Well, before the war they had horses. After that they had, she pointed out one of the old trucks that she'd learned to drive in, but she'd been driving at 4 years old. She could steer it down the field. And that's what Tiny used to do with our girls. As soon as one of them started school, the next one got to go with him feeding. And he always laughed. Carol was the one that would stand up to steer. He'd put it in no gear, and she'd stand up to steer, and the dog would put his paws on the dash to make sure she was going in the right place. And if she got into a snowbank, he'd have to get off the back end and steer it out. I think he had more fun with that than she did. The Fourth has always been a real celebration. They used to have the foot races. And I have a picture starting, in front of the school and going east down towards the dump.
No.
And that is exactly where I remember running those races. We'd practice for weeks because you could get, I think you could get a nickel if you won a game. And the nickel was an ice cream cone then. I don't remember where you got, but yeah, they had the drugstore right there with ice cream cones. But I have a picture there of, it must be Chateau, helping one of the first graders, who would be that much, I suppose Cordell maybe,
Yeah, probably.
get started for a race. And that racing down that same street is what I remember so clearly.
Yeah, they did that a few years. They used to do it at the track field, but I think that they're kind of doing it closer to the school.
Yeah, they done it up there. That was one of the years it rained, and I think they were able to move out for a while.
Hmm.
But the big 4th of July was always the rodeos.
And that was before they had it where it is now, isn't it? Didn't they have some other rodeos?
The first ones I remember, and that would have been grade school, were south of the tracks, probably about where the Jensen,
Okay.
not the alignment shop, was where the hangar is now, but across there. And my memory of that was seeing a horse break its leg. And I can still remember that leg dangling. And they shot the horse and dragged it out and put it into Tank Coulee, where it smelled for the rest of the summer. But it was quite a bit later that they built the one out west of town. And they were having the rodeo west of town the summer I was dating Tiny, which would have been 59. But they had it out there before that. And I'm trying, as I drive in there, that arena must have been before you get to the house. It was in that corner there, but I don't remember being at the arena and having the Hens house there.
So it was before, or it was after the house was gone, huh?
No, the house is still there. I just can't remember of course, going to the rodeo, I would never have looked at a house. But I should have known where it was. But I picture that arena right in the corner between just in the west corner between the road off two. And I'm not sure there's room enough for it there. It might have been a little farther to the west.
Maybe.
Like maybe where Dulles lived before they moved into it. There would have been room there.
Yeah. So were there a lot of other big events like that throughout the year? Or?
The 4th was always Hinsdale's big one. Memorial Day was always a big program, but I think that was pretty much through the Legion, and my dad was always busy with that, or involved in that enough to keep us there. But well, I know Dad used to saddle my horse up, and she would just sort of stay around over there until somebody was ready to ride her, and there was usually somebody was there pretty fast. And that has to have been after I left. I left in 49 and came back in 59. So anything I can't remember, I said, happened in those 10 years.
Something in the 50s.
Yeah. But I'm not sure when the bandstand left. That couldn't have been that late, because I remember I can remember my dad going over every single night and planting those, or watering those trees.
Yeah.